Okay, here we go again. This is Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com, and we're starting again in Carrara, my favorite 3D program. This time I've imported actually an OBJ file from an export that came from another program, and that other program is Marvelous Designer 3, MD3, and all I did is I went to export this right there as an OBJ file. Right. Now there's a couple of options when you do that, and perhaps I added some other clothing like shoes and that sort of things. But I wanted to see how this goes importing that into Carrara. So that worked actually pretty nicely. I removed the character, the body, and ended up having just the piece of clothing. I added some textures in Carrara for that leopard look, and then went ahead and rendered that. Now when you render that in Carrara, one of the options you have when you save it out as an image sequence is to indicate some additional information you want for multipass rendering. So what I did is I rendered it with the background, meaning that I have now two sequences of images, one with the RGB values, the colors, and another one with just a indication of whether I'm looking at the background or whether I'm looking at something in the foreground. And that's basically serving as an image sequence of the mask. In other words, if I'm looking at it right here, here's the image sequence that I would have expected, but on top of that I also have an image sequence with the background information. So I have the same number of frames here with just a black and white, giving me sort of the mask. And what we'll do is we'll use both of these to assemble these into a VI file. So let's go over to Project Dog Waffle. This is Howler 9, and actually it's already a little bit beyond 9. We've just started the alpha of what may eventually become 9.1, so very early. But so far we won't really see much of a difference. At least I won't be going too far into any of the new features currently being developed. Let's focus on what we've got here. So I'm going to go into loading the sequence, loading a sequence right there, and of course we need to go find it. So that's under my computer. This is the French version of Windows 8. I'm going to go to the D drive, find my daily dose, and I think one down I'm going to have my MD3. And so under MD3 I have a sequence folder, a folder in which I saved all my rendering from Carrara. And in this one here we have a sequence of images that are the background, and then a little bit further down we have the same sequence of images but containing just the RGB values, the color. So let's go and grab the background first. I want to load those into an animation, and let's set the frames per second to 30, FPS at 30, and play it. And so here we go. So what we're looking at is essentially sort of the mask indicating where the object was versus where the background was. And so we have a little glitchy here. That's an interesting one. I wonder where that one came from. Maybe that's something we can clear out, and that's really one thing we can do actually. We can go and simply paint over it, right, with the right button. With the left button it would be black, with the right button we can make it white. Alright, so and we probably will have a couple. Yeah, there's a few of those. I don't know where this came from, but that's what we have as the output from Carrara, I suppose. Anyway, let's ignore that and just focus on the main animation here. And what we'll do is we'll use this. I will save this as an AVI, right? It started as an image sequence. We can now save it either as a DWA, that's over here, or as an AVI file. So save AVI, or save, let's use save AVI, and put that into the right folder right here. And I've got a name already for it, but I'll just use that again. Actually, it's not the depth information, it's the mask. So let's call that mask, and this is sequence 2. So let's go right here, sequence 2, save it. And as usual, it will ask us to, oops, that's not what I need, not Carrara, there it is. It will ask us to indicate not just where to save it and what file name, but also what codec when we go into AVI. I'm going to use a lossless Lagarif codec. It's fast, it's free, and it's lossless. Alright, so I've got this as an AVI. Just for sake of education, I'll also save it as a DWA, the dog waffle animation save. and that'll be the same thing. So again, I'll have, this one is not depth based, so it's going to be named something with the mask. There you go. And a DWA as opposed to a AVI. That's a quick memory dump. It's a large file, it's not compressed, but it's fast. And if you have a fast hard drive, the disk is going to take that in really quickly. It's a very fast, convenient way to do a quick save of the animation. Now, the thing is, this is going to serve as sort of the selection mask. Actually, you know what? Not this is going to serve as the mask, it's rather the opposite. We need to invert it, right? Because right now, if I select this background is selected, whereas the piece of clothing is not, and I really want the inverse of that. So I should actually invert this and do that, for instance, from the image menu and apply that through the entire animation, and then save that. So let's do that. You know, we'll keep one inverted and the other one not. Let's save as a DWA, this one here. Actually, it wasn't supposed to be sequence 1. It's supposed to be sequence 2. But still, it's going to be this one, and we'll overwrite that. So I think, there it is, and overwrite it. Yep. Okay, so we have that. Now we'll go and load the other animation, right? The animation sequence, which contains the colors. So let's load sequence from the animation menu, and we get back to this. It still has the selection we did earlier, which is great because you may need to reload the same animation again and again as you experiment with things. And so it's great because it remembers that sequence of images that you have had selected in the past. Now, though, we're going to choose the colors, which start here and go down to the bottom. Use shift click on that, or just click and drag to the bottom until you have all the images you want from sequence 0 to 119. Yeah, I have 120 frames here. And PNG files we can load directly. Otherwise, use an external loader. You can check this option if you want to use what we call the external loader. It's based on ImageMagick, and it will work, but it's slower. But it's also useful if you have other formats you want to load that we don't have a direct loader ourselves. Here we can go with PNG with ours, so let's load that and load the image in. And so here is now the animation, but with the colors rather than with the mask. And that we can save as well. So we'll go to animation as an AVI, for instance, save as AVI. And we'll call this not the mask, but rather sequence 2 colors. Right? And save it. And keep it again in the lossless codec as long as you're going to work with it. It's good to keep it lossless. And so here we go. We can do a quick show on that just to verify. Yep, it's got it. Let's go save it. All right, so what do I want to do now? I have this animation, and I have also the other animation containing the mask. And what you can do is you can use the mask as an animated selection mask. Right? The AVI file I created, or that image sequence, was put together as a DWA or as an AVI, and I can designate that as my selection. And you do that in the animation menu. You can say right down here, animated selection. And so, for instance, I'm going to use the DWA version, which is this one here, sequence 2 mask. Open that, and it's not actually opening and loading the whole file, it's just pointing to it at this point. But it will be using it as a mask, as a selection, if you as you go scrubbing through it. And it's a bit difficult to see here because of this white background, but there are marching ants going along. Perhaps easier to see if you use the selection overlay alpha. There you can see that the background is actually not selected, and that's why it turns pink. The areas here in between are also turning pink, and so they too are not selected. But there is a marching ants. There you go, you can see it now when I zoom out. That selection indicating, and no color change on the inside, so that is fully selected. And you can actually scrub through that animation, and the mask will follow with it. So we now have two animations. The one you're looking at in terms of the color with the leopard patterns on the clothing, and then you have the other one containing the animated selection. That's down here, animated selection, it is checked. And that's how you do that. That's how you can take two separate animations, whether they came from an AVI file or from a DWA, two separate animations, and have one go into becoming the alpha mask or the selection, and the other one is the one that you obviously see here. You could also use one in the what's the other one? The swap channel, the swap buffer. So you could do that too. That's down here again under animation, animated image, swap image or selection. We use the selection here. And so why would you use that? Well, sometimes you need to reassemble images, right? You have an image sequence that's the RGB values and another image sequence containing a mask. Either you manually painted that by hand, or you got Carrara to render it, or some other program to render it into two separate files, and you'd like to do something with both together. For instance, you might want to simply pick this up now as a custom brush, and in fact a custom animated brush. So we've seen that before. You can do that with the custom brush selection tool, and then we would pick it up with the Alt key down, and it would load the whole sequence with the mask into the custom brush, ready for you to paint with it. But there is another couple of things you can do with that, and one of them is to simply apply a filter, but only apply it on that part which is selected. And that could be, for instance, in this case, to blur it or to sharpen it or do all sorts of things through the timeline. And for instance, let's say we want to change color, do a color add or color reduction, and you notice that I'm reducing the red. If I didn't have the mask, the background would also change. It would also lose the red. But because I have the mask, only the clothing that is currently selected is turning green, or getting to be a different color. And so that's that. You can definitely reassemble different masks into an animated mask sequence into the whole frame sequence. Let's go and apply that as an example. It looks a bit ugly here. It's all sorts of temporary graphics that's left over, but once it's done, it cleans it up, and then we can go and clear the selection, and we are now left with that. We can also detach the animated selection from here, so it's no longer using that. Clear alpha, and done with this, and there we go. So now we have a changed color on the foreground, on the object, without having changed color on the background. That was just one of the things you could do with that, and I hope this was insightful and inspiring. You will be certainly finding lots of ways to use the Dog Waffle Howler with your 3D renders, whether they come from Carrara or from DAZ Studio, Poser, or whatever application you may be using. Lots of ways to use this together. All right, thanks for watching.